They sat me near the kitchen door, where heat and steam curled past my hair and silverware scraped plates in jagged rhythm. I caught the smirk across the table before he raised his glass, voice oily and loud. "Well, at least she's here now, scrubbing floors instead of files." Laughter rippled, low and mean. I stared at the cracked wine glass, thumb brushing the fault line like a wound I couldn't close. Chewing silence, I remembered what they'd all chosen to forget. Nights I stayed awake so they could sleep, things I did that stained my hands. Fork hits the plate, sharp as blame. Then the door swung. A voice behind them trembled. Eyes widened in disbelief. "Ma'am, director. Before I share my story, I want to know you're here with me. Just say hi in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from. And if this story moves something in you, consider subscribing." I sat at the edge of the table near the swinging kitchen door, where every burst of cold air slid down my spine and the smell of steam and dishwater clung like something I couldn't wash off. The chandelier overhead burned in blurred yellow pools, casting faces in soft wax. Features held just so, perfect for the photos on the far wall, where my own smile had long since been etched out. Silverware scraped in careful, even rhythm. Glasses clinked somewhere distant. Toasts offered to no one at this end. Light spilled across half my cheek, leaving the other in deliberate shadow, as if even the room was unsure I belonged here. They said my name with polite effort, mouths pulling at corners without heat. A cousin's hand met mine loose and cool, fingers sliding away before I could hold on. My mother's perfume drifted in a stale cloud as she kissed the air beside me. Her voice calm, rehearsed, telling me I looked well without meeting my eyes. Across the table, Brooke shone in a dress chosen for her. Hair set just right, the kind of laughter people made room for. Compliments gathered at her feet like petals, the conversation pressing close, warm. I cleared my throat once, a small sound that fell between them and disappeared. Someone asked something I could have answered, but another voice leapt in, carried the talk away like water over stones. My hand circled the stem of my glass, thumb sliding over the condensation until it left my skin cold and wet. I breathed in carefully, let the clatter of silver on porcelain steady my pulse. The fork resting against my plate was clean and sharp. A crack in the wine glass caught the low light and gleamed. Somewhere past the hush of breathing and the scrape of chairs, someone's laugh lifted bright and easy, rolling back like a wave I didn't bother trying to ride. They'd lined the chairs tight along the wall, mine angled so it caught the chill leaking under the window frame, cold settling at my ankles. The table stretched too far for voices to carry, the cloth bunched near my plate where no one smoothed it. On the wall, photos gleamed in mismatched frames, smiles perfect, posed, but I saw the space left where one used to hang, a ghost outline in dust no one bothered to clean. The candles near them flickered steady, but the one at my end guttered low, wax dripped down the holder onto the cloth, hardened without notice. "Rachel?" someone said, slow like they were checking if it was still the right word. I blinked, but the voice moved on before I could nod. A dish was passed, heavy with roast, but tilted just out of reach as it swung away, leaving a thin smear of gravy across the table runner. I wiped it with my napkin, folding the stain inside where no one would see. A bowl of green beans sat beside me, pushed off to the side when the centerpiece was set down, its polished silver catching my face in warped reflections. Aunt Carol's voice lifted, smooth. "It was Brooke who planned all this," she said, raising her glass. Every detail perfect. A round of light laughter followed. Forks tapped plates in careful rhythm. I shifted forward once, breath caught, ready to say something, but the talk washed over me, redirected before it reached. "Oh, Brooke always had such an eye," someone else added, their voice sweetened for her. My fingers found the glass stem again, sliding slow through the condensation that beaded and rolled onto my palm. Sorry, Rachel." Uncle Frank corrected himself when he finally glanced my way. The words thin. He managed a nod before turning to the next face, one easier to place. I listened to the silverware scrape in staggered beats, someone's spoon stirring coffee unevenly at the far end. The sound rattled, then settled. When I tried to lean in, to add a word to the swirl of small talk, my voice caught in the hush that followed, and no one turned. Their heads angled in closer to each other, shoulders touching, leaving space around me like I'd asked for it. I let my eyes drift to the cloth napkin in my lap, fingers pressing the edge into sharp folds. The smell of my mother's old perfume floated past on her way to the kitchen, thin and floral and stale. The glass touched my lip, but I didn't drink. Someone laughed down the table, easy and warm, while my thumb traced the line of a water ring on the cloth. My chair shifted a fraction as someone squeezed by, catching on the wall and dragging just enough to make a sound before settling back into stillness. They asked Brooke to stand at the far end of the table, the place where the chandelier hung lowest, and the light caught in perfect rings around her hair. She rested one hand lightly on the chair they'd nudged just so, angled to face everyone. The glow wrapped her face in soft gold, while the rest of us sat in pooled shadow, candlelight stuttering and falling away before it reached me. Someone clinked a glass to quiet the room. "Brooke, would you say a few words?" they asked, voice eager, kind. She smiled slow, lifted her chin to answer. Applause scattered like seeds thrown wide, sprouting laughter along the table. "Brooke, you always know what to say," Uncle Frank added, loud enough to carry. "Brooke planned this whole thing," Aunt Carol beamed, voice tightening with pride. The words rolled over each other, warm and round, landing easy. Heads turned down the line, eyes settling on her with practiced admiration, the collective weight of every gaze pressing in one direction. I watched them lean closer, shoulders tipping in, like her gravity drew them in tight. My name floated once, thin, from the other end. Rachel, but it was offered like a placeholder, dropped before it cleared the air. I shifted just enough to catch the edge of the mirror on the sideboard. Brooke's reflection crisp, sharp, framed by the glow. Mine a blur in the dark wood, lost behind the glassware stacked in front. Someone asked her about the centerpiece. She thanked them graciously. I felt my mouth part, a breath gathered. But the talk flowed past like a river I couldn't cross. The chair under me scraped faintly as I adjusted, noise swallowed by fresh laughter. I laid my palm over my glass, fingers pressing against the chill, leaving a wet smear I didn't bother wiping away. She described the menu with a shy laugh, credited help she hadn't needed. They nodded, agreed, told her she was thoughtful. My fingers flexed once around the stem of my glass, then fell still. When I glanced up, the room seemed smaller. Eyes moved around her like orbit. Light from the candle near me guttered low, throwing my shadow against the table, warped by the curve of the linen. My mouth stayed open for a beat longer than it should have, then closed silent. Applause rose again, polite but full. The sound stretched, filled the corners, then fell in scattered beats like rain easing off. I didn't join. My gaze held the way her silhouette burned onto the wall behind her, clean and bright, while mine split across chair backs and wood trim, broken by the gap in between. I remember leaning in just enough that my elbow left a faint print on the cloth, the edge of my glass turning slowly between my fingers. I cleared my throat, small, felt the hush near me stretch thin. My eyes found Aunt Carol first, then drifted to Uncle Frank, searching for the space to land a word. I tried, voice low, careful with the shape of it, as if too much sound might crack something. My shoulders shifted forward, inviting, almost eager in their quiet. I glanced at Brooke, waited for her to see me, for anyone to. But a laugh spiked sharp across the table, big and rolling, crashing through the pause. Glasses lifted. The sound of them touching was quick and eager. Brooke, say it again," Frank called, delighted, her name warm on his tongue. Brooke's face lit, teeth bright. Brooke planned all of it. Someone else chimed, and her name landed twice, round and proud, filling the empty places. My words stalled, sat heavy in my mouth. The light caught them instead, settling on her face, drawing gold lines on her cheekbones, while mine fell back into shadow. I blinked once, slow, felt my mouth hover open before it closed. My tongue rested dry against my teeth. My fingers relaxed around the glass, just enough that the chill left a damp ring on the cloth. No one turned back. They were laughing still. The sound steady, reassuring, like a hearth I wasn't welcome to sit near. I let my eyes drift down the line of silverware, trace the shapes they made in the candlelight, the reflections warped and doubled. My other hand found the edge of the napkin and flattened it, folding the crease sharper than it needed to be. I straightened up by degrees, spine settling back into the chair. The cushion gave a tired sigh beneath me. My eyes flicked to the mirror behind the buffet, caught the way Brooke's face gleamed in the frame, steady and full, while mine sat further back, blurred by glass, divided by stacked dishes. I inhaled through my nose, let it out slow, no tremor. The last of the laughter softened, thinned. I laid the napkin down carefully, palm smoothing once, twice, until it lay flat. My glass settled with a dull click beside it. At the end of the table, the candle guttered once, then steadied, throwing her shadow long against the wall, while mine broke on the chair back and disappeared. I watched the light gather around Brooke, the glow built just for the shape of her shoulders, the turn of her cheek when she smiled at them. Her name passed between them twice, gentle but sure, lifted with a small laugh, and the clink of glasses that caught and rang. The sound of silver nudged plates in unison. A practiced quiet fell before they laughed again. Easy warm, I think. My seat felt too low, or too far. Hard to tell, the candle nearest me guttering with each shift of air, sending my shadow flickering along the tablecloth before dying. I looked at her the way you might study something in a shop window, wanting to understand the price tag you couldn't quite read. It was like a memory, but not quite. The shape of chairs pulled closer together, the smell of polish and food warming the walls, voices that dipped for secrets and lifted for jokes. A small place where there was room to say something, maybe. The reflection in the mirror caught her clearly, framed by bottles and soft glow, mine behind it, warped where the glass bent. My thumb twisted the corner of the napkin in my lap until it folded itself sharp, lines that didn't match the old creases. I shifted just enough to make the chair sigh, straightening before letting my shoulders sink. A slow exhale that felt stolen. My hand lifted the glass halfway, the rim cold at my lip, but it waited there too long before sinking back down, leaving a faint circle of water that spread slowly, faded before it dried. I didn't clear my throat, though I thought I might. The sound stuck too far back. It crossed my mind to lean in again, to speak or offer a word, even if I wasn't sure which one would come first, but I let the thought sit instead. My fingers spread across the cloth to smooth it flat, found a wrinkle and traced it instead. The breathing got quieter when no one was talking, a hush that made the room bigger. My eyes caught on the reflection once more, hers easy in the middle of everything, mine cut in half by a line of glass. The candle closest to me burned low enough that the pool of light on the floor shifted, broke into two shadows that didn't quite meet, mine slipping along the seam of chairs and table legs, catching on nothing before it thinned and bent away. I watched the room through low light, the chandelier humming warm, the gold blur caught on lifted glasses, reflections bending across wine, laughter rising with the clink of silver, thinned by distance in my ears, a muffled cheer that pressed against the walls and settled, the edge of a joke rolling over someone's smile without catching mine. Heads turned in, close, the light carving their profiles in soft, forgiving lines. My fingers found the napkin, pulled it slow from my lap, the linen folding with a hush that no one heard. I smoothed it flat on the table, one crease, then another, thumb dragging along the seam, waiting, I think, for a voice that didn't shape itself. The moment stretched and loose. Nothing claimed it. I held it there, palm heavy on the cloth. A small weight, only I seemed to know. I let go, picked up my coat from the back of the chair, the fabric slumping over my arm, sleeve dangling toward the floor, my hand brushing the seat's edge to steady it. A soft scrape as it straightened. No scrape of other chairs, no shuffle to match it. The hush at this end of the table unbroken except for the buzz of faraway talk. The laughter still easy, fluid. Someone's glass tapped gently. My shoes pressed into the floor one at a time, a muted knock lost in the fabric of sound. I rose in pieces, shoulder then spine, breath slow, a seam coming undone without sound. My coat settled over me, heavier than I remembered, my arms slipping into it with a pull that caught for just a second before falling free. The chair behind me now empty, but rigid. I walked to the door without rush, my step measured to keep from echoing, the floor cool through thin soles. My fingers wrapped the knob, but didn't turn it at once, held there in the quiet candlelight from behind, catching on the brass, bending in it, the push of my coat shifting against my side. The sound of a laugh reached and fell away. The light stayed soft, but thinned toward the walls, shadows stretched until they broke. The table behind us stretched. I watched from the edge of the light, the way she set the vase just so in the center, fingers adjusting stems until they fanned right, candle glow catching her hair in soft lines. The table settling quiet for a second, before the laughter spilled back in. Someone lifted a glass, called her name once, and more. The sound bouncing off walls that felt closer than I remembered. She smoothed the cloth at the corner, the fold crisp where her thumb pressed, eyes checking each place, setting with a tilt of her head. Voice low when she asked if everything was all right. Smiles answered her, easy. The knife on my side of the table felt cold in my palm without moving. I let it rest there, heavy in a quiet that didn't need to be filled. My eyes drifted across the stemware, catching bits of... I caught my reflection in the glass cabinet door, behind her, hers straight, unbroken, clear in the curve of the wood frame, mine thinner, set back, distorted by the lines of glass and stacked dishes. The room moved around her without pause. Chairs scraped in greeting. Someone called thanks, but the name wrong. Not mine, not quite hers. A small laugh covering the slip, as though it had... My fingers curled around the base of the glass, but didn't lift, the rim cool where it waited. I let it go to rest back on the cloth without sound, shifted in the chair enough that the legs whispered against the floor, knees turning away by inches, the back settling into the curve of my spine as the room held its shape without me. The chandelier's light warm in the center, but paling where it reached the... Through the mirror, I saw her tilt her head to laugh, mouth opening just enough to show teeth. My eyes lowering to the shine of the table. The napkin smoothed flat in front of me, without a crease left. A thought forming that didn't finish. There was a time. But nothing followed. My mouth closed again without making sound. The reflection catching only the slope of my shoulder. I saw him pause by my chair, the server shifting his tray to one hand so he could set the glass down slow. The base making no sound against the cloth, his eyes meeting mine for the briefest moment. Steady but soft, no question in them, no flicker away. The angle of his wrist, careful so the rim lined up with my plate, his fingers brushing the napkin edge to straighten it where it had folded in on itself. A small nod as he stepped back. The light overhead settled on the table, catching the curve of the glass, making the water inside shimmer against the dimmer glow around the edges. My hand hovered over it before lowering to my lap, breath leaving me slower than it needed to. The sound of silverware shifting, laughter somewhere else. My name said wrong again, clipped, corrected with a huff. their eyes already turned back to the center, where the talk stayed warm. "Mom," the server said again, quieter. The title clean in his mouth, respectful but small, a space held without explanation. My fingers tapping once against the napkin had left smooth. The cloth softer than it looked, folding easily where my thumb pressed. The glass clear enough to see his shape in it as he moved on. The reflection bending at the edge, straightening where the light caught the bottom. The candle behind it sending shadow. I let my eyes follow him for a second too long, felt them drift back to the table. The cloth rumpled further down, where no one fixed it. The shine of the plates dulled with smudges of sauce. The light pulling away at the corners of the room. My fingers flexed once. Found the stem of the glass, didn't lift it, just held, the rim cold under my nails. A breath caught, let out softer, the noise of it lost under the rise of a note or laugh. When I blinked, it was slow. The edge of the napkin creased where I'd folded it back on itself, a line that held even when I smoothed it. The candlelight behind my shoulder dimming as someone leaned forward into it, blocking the glow from reaching my side of the table. The server's steps quiet as they moved on, my eyes dropping to the way the cloth shifted when I let go. The shine of the groan settled back, voices filling it in an easy way. I caught the shift of his head before he turned all the way, our eyes brushing across the space between, not held, not named, the light above splitting us down the middle. One side of his face in gold, the other cut to shadow, his mouth easing into that small, practiced smile for someone else. Words tossed over his shoulder in a voice that didn't seek me, laughter landing soft around him without cracking the hush. At my feet, a scrape of chair legs buried in talk, the tinkle of silver laid down with care, the soft scrape of a fork finding its place. I remembered a nod once. Quick, certain, final. Fingers that used to uncross to reach but stayed gathered at the chest. Elbows tucked in like defense. The shape of his jaw tilting away when my voice had tried to catch it. All of it smudged now by the glow cast over his shoulder. That small pool of light mating a wreathed tail. I watched, held too still, breath clicking in my throat before it left quiet. My fingers on the back of the chair tightening, then falling slack. The linen underneath crumpling, then settling back smooth. The air pressed thin between us so I could see the crease at his cuff. The seam at the collar not quite flat. The space filling and emptying without either of us stepping in. No voice to bridge it. No shift of weight to draw it close. My head bent by degrees, chin tucking slow. The skin at my throat pulling as I swallowed once. Dry. No sound but the hush of my own shirt moving as I let my shoulders roll lower. Breath falling out slow. Fingers uncurling from the cloth, leaving creases that didn't fade right away. The weight in my palm easing before it left altogether. The room holding itself around us without noticing. The table. I let my eyes drop to the chair I'd touched. The shape of it straightened, the seat empty, the fabric still catching what was left of the light. The glow there warm enough to show the grain of the wood, but no shape bent to fit it, no shadow to claim it, just the space where something might have sat, while the laughter wound on, soft, easy for someone else. I stepped just far enough in to see the table laid out in soft yellow light, the folds in the cloth pressed flat where once they bunched under my hand. A glass at the head of the table that looked like mine except the rim unchipped. The chair there pushed in at perfect angle, shadows tucked in beneath it, like it had always sat empty waiting for the right person. My eyes caught the edge of the frame, on the wall, the photo taken years back with my hands teeing the lens. He was there now, leaning in with his elbow easy on the wood, one arm resting over the back of the chair like he'd always belonged. Voice pitched low enough to make the others lean in, a laugh peeling away in slow ripples that caught in the chandelier and stayed there. Someone said his name clear and rounded, the syllables weightless but landing in the center of the warmth. Forks pausing in the air to acknowledge him, the light catching on his face without breaking into. My fingers found the edge of the table as I passed, nails brushing along the finish that had dulled in patches from use I remembered. I didn't grip it, just let my palm settle there for a beat. my eyes lifting to the glass he pulled closer. The way his thumb spun it without spilling. The soft scrape of the base on cloth that no one heard over the laughter. The napkin under his wrist folded crisp. Perfect. My name more over the laughter. The napkin under his wrist. I let my gaze tilt sideways, past his shoulder to the wall beyond, where the candlelight blurred it at the edges. The shine on the glass cabinet, holding reflections that bent and thinned the further they got from center. My mouth felt closed in on itself, the skin at my jaw tight without pulling. Breath, pushing out shallow and slow. The tips of my fingers, lifting from the table, one at a time, leaving no mark. I shifted weight back just enough the floor didn't creak, my shoulders lowering as though they'd agreed on their own. The hem of my coat brushing against my shin, light catching the edge of it in a dull line that didn't travel. The chair stayed filled behind me, occupied without question. The plate gleamed under direct glow, the glass clear enough to see the shape of a smile curving in it. The sound of his name spoken again, soft but final. Violet Maya. I sat with my back straightened just enough, eyes lifting as the voice rang clear through the small pop and crackle of the microphone, listing every detail so carefully, the way the plan had worked, how thoughtful it was, the timing perfect, the way it brought everyone together, the light catching motes in the air above the table, spinning them in lazy circles under the chandelier. My breath held at the pause before the name. It came sharp, certain wrong, the syllables neat, not mine, said twice for emphasis, said so everyone could hear, the sound of it settling over the table like a cloth laid smooth. My eyes holding there a second longer before blinking once, slow, the lashes lowering as the applause rose, first in ripples, then in a steady wave that pressed at my ears without pause. The forks paused. The glasses... The light fell away from my end of the table, leaving only reflections in the polished surface, warped and breaking at the edges. I saw the way his hand lifted in a small wave, modest but accepting, the corners of his mouth pulling in the practiced line of humility. The napkin at his plate perfectly folded, no crease out of place. Except for one pair of eyes in the first row, the turn of a neck that was too quick, stopping halfway before it should have, the brief widening before they dropped, the fingers that tightened around the program on their lap before relaxing, the mouth pressing shut like it held back something better unsaid, their palms coming together and applause half a beat too slow, then falling in time with the rest, their gaze dipping to the floors if the boards needs. My hand moved without thought, fingers pressing into the edge of the napkin in front of me, thumb smoothing the hem so it lay flat, the cloth catching the light in dull, uneven ripples, my other hand finding the stem of the glass without lifting it, the wine inside untouched, a small shake in the liquid settling without spill, breath leaving me in a line too thin to hear, lips closing gently over nothing, the applause continuing. I stood slowly, chair legs brushing the floor in a hush that didn't turn heads, the room holding its rhythm without pause, shoulders lowering with the weight of the coat caught at my elbow, cloth sliding smooth as I let it fall into place, feet moving one after the other without sound, doorway opening around me like breath leaving lungs too long held. Air met me cool in the hall, the spill of light from inside pressing a line across the floor, cutting through the darker tiles where my shoes landed, the edge of my coat lifting with the quiet draft that moved just enough to strand of hair against my cheek. No voice following, no hand on my arm, just the small creak of the door settling back into its frame behind me. I turned once, eyes finding the glass set in the wall, the surface hazed by the change in light, shapes inside swimming slow, laughter muted by thickness, the faces caught in gold that didn't reach me, mouths open on words I didn't, the blur of my own reflection trailing along the edge of the pane. Half lit, half taken by shadow, nothing missing inside to make them notice. Fingers brushed the rail as I stepped out onto the narrow landing, palm flattening against cool metal before falling slack, the coat settling heavier across my back, shoulder blades easing with each small exhale, chin dipping until breath spilled quiet into the space before me. The streetlight outside casting a faint line up my arm, before breaking on the curve of my wrist. I didn't shift again, didn't clear my throat. Hand sliding off the railing without drag, thumb catching a seam in the fabric before letting it go. Eyes finding nothing in particular, past the reflection in the glass. Lips closing gentle without press, breath drawing once more through my nose. Long even, the glow from inside painting just the edge of my hair, enough to leave a thin band of light across the concrete where my shadow. I felt the drift of air before I saw him step closer. The hush outside still enough that the small scrape of his shoe over concrete seemed too loud. Head dipped, as if reading words only he could see. His hand brushing the lapel of his jacket like he wasn't sure it fit. Eyes lifting at last to catch mine without force. Voice softer than the wind pushing hair against my cheek. Saying nothing much until the pause. It landed without warning, the space between us flattening, breath hitching in the hollow of my chest, my eyes blinking slow as though the light had changed color, watching him but not really seeing, focus settling on the line of his shoulder, the way the fabric wrinkled under his grip, one knuckle white where it pressed, my mouth parting just enough to let air in but no answer out, fingers at my side twitching before curling in, nazing. His gaze faltered only then, drifting sideways like he'd seen too much, eyes lowering to the ground, shifting weight without apology, a breath pulled and held in his ribs, my own lungs remembering how to move, the faintest wind catching the edge of my coat and tugging it back into place around me, the hem shivering once before settling, a line of light from the doorway glancing off the side of my face and vanishing behind me. I didn't look away right away, letting the moment hang until it felt heavy enough to tip, the shape of that old phrase echoing without voice, coloring the quiet with something I hadn't tasted in too long, my hand flexing again and this time not flattening, thumb pressing into the seam of my coat, finding the place worn smooth from use, breath leaving slow, measured, a shift of my weight that felt like remembering how to stand. The corridor didn't fill with talk. No laughter leaked out this far, just the muted wash of it layered under the sound of my own exhale. Eyes tracking past him to the glass along the wall, seeing my reflection there, dull but present, a shadow against the shape of doors that stayed shut, the light catching the edge of my jaw before falling away, leaving me there, quiet, but unmistakably solid. A hand brushed past mine too quickly, sending the slim leather folder skidding across the table. It flipped once before landing open, the badge glinting under the overhead light, letters clean, sharp, unmissable. Federal Director, pressed deep enough to hold shadow in each groove. Sound thinned. Someone's breath broke short. The small metallic clash of a fork against a plate stuttered and died. Conversations clipped off mid-sentence, syllables lost in the space between teeth. One man's eyes cut sideways, widening before narrowing, mouth pinched silent. Across the table, a woman's hand paused in midair, napkin dangling loose, a tremor stilled at her wrist. No one spoke. The air pulled tight like a held cord. The laughter from the far end halted in pieces, dying without a single cough to bury it. I felt the weight of their gaze moving, one after another, drawn slow but sure, pulled by the same gravity they'd once ignored. They didn't look away now. The difference was not respect, not yet, but something nearer caution. I didn't move. My fingers, resting on the cloth, spread just enough to flatten the lines beneath them. A single measured exhale leaving my chest without rush. My shoulders settled back against the chair, unbowed. The light from the chandelier caught the edge of the badge still lying there, throwing a pale reflection along the polished wood, enough to illuminate the circle of silence it demanded. I lifted my eyes level, met theirs, one at a time, without blinking, without apology. Chin lifting just a fraction, nothing dramatic, but final. My mouth closed, no tremor at its corners. I let the hand that had almost reached for the badge fall instead to the side of my glass, fingers draping there without hurry. The glass stayed where it was, untouched. The table stretched before me, wide and quiet, holding its hush like an offering. I pushed my chair back without hurry, the legs sliding in a hush that felt deliberate, not a scrape or a demand. No one moved to block me. A few shifted their gaze to the floor, eyes darting away before they could meet mine. Someone cleared their throat too softly to finish the sound. Hands that had gestured grandly earlier now folded quiet in laps or pressed to glass stems without lifting. I let my fingers brush the napkin once before folding it in half with care. Edge to edge, creases smoothed with my thumb. I set it down square in front of me, slow enough that the fabric settled with a small sigh of release. The glass beside it stayed full, untouched, ring of condensation pooling beneath it like a mark that would dry soon enough. Someone tried to say my name. It caught in their mouth, emerging only as an uncertain vowel, before stopping altogether. Their shoulders turned as if to allow space without knowing why. The words failing, the tone gone softer than they'd ever used before. Eyes flicked up, checking, measuring, then dropped before they landed anywhere that mattered. I didn't need their words. I didn't wait. My hand slid off the edge of the table, brushing the cool wood in a single line as I stood fully, the coat at my elbow settling around me in a way that felt precise. I turned with no flourish, no angle left for anyone to misread, chin lifting just enough to see every face without challenge or appeal. As I walked, the hush stayed, broken only by the small thuds of chairs shifting in response, space opening in the path without instruction. The napkin remained behind, folded perfectly. The glass of wine reflected the overhead light, untouched, color unbroken. My chair sat pushed back, empty now, but somehow more solid than it had felt all evening. They watched, some with heads bent, some following my steps with a long, measured glance. The laughter didn't return, caught in the corners of mouths that couldn't find the right shape anymore. A breeze stirred the corner of the tablecloth as I passed, the edge fluttering before settling flat again. I didn't ask them to see me. They did.